Okay, you
We're
should be
here.
live.
Hi, this is Clint with Artists of the Resistance, and we have two individuals tonight that we're going to be chatting about. Um, Sara Trails and I guess her partner in crime, Laura. And I didn't get your last name. I'm sorry.
Black.
Black. Okay, that should be pretty easy. Um, they are connected through the social justice.
Sewing Academy.
Yes, Sewing Academy. It's very similar to we had on lady from the Tiny Pricks Project, Diane, the other couple weeks ago, and so it's interesting that having two completely different nonprofits or whatever everybody's considered doing similar things. I have to admit that I did a piece for Diana, and it was the first time I'd had a needle and thread seriously in my hand since I was a teenager sewing patches onto my blue jeans, and I had never done any needle pointing before, and so it was really an interesting experience. And I know from looking at the website, Sara, that you were originally someone introduced you to quilting to start with, I think.
Yeah.
And so how did quilting get into the Remembrance Project?
So I've been sewing since I was 4. My mom enrolled me in a lot of adult level sewing classes. And by the time I was 16, I had written a book on how to sew and a pattern collection, a fabric collection, and a lot of just sewing entrepreneurial endeavors. And then I was really at the intersection of attending UC Berkeley, where my passions for social justice and sewing intertwined. And I soon made a quilt about Trayvon Martin. And then I realized lots of kids, wanted to sew and make things that had statements as well. So then, I kind of moved forward, created SGSA as a brave space for kids to create, learn sewing skills in a really, critical learning environment.
Mm-hmm. Something that they can see progress in, something that's kind of tactile, that they can go home and be proud of, or being a part of, or being in the community with other kids with similar, not real, well, maybe for teenagers, maybe a little unusual. I don't think my daughter ever really got into sewing, not quilting or anything like that. But it came back. Yeah, it came from my high school. I had a week in shop. I had a week of home ec, and I guess I learned to stitch. And I actually made a pair of pants with my mom back when there were seersucker bell bottoms back in the late 60s or early 70s. So I'm really dating myself. And I was interested with the remembrance of now you're working in prisons.
So we just have, SGSA has workshops everywhere. So high schools, prisons, jails, community centers, LGBT places, homeless shelters, literally undergrad classes. So we just do workshops with, for the most part, pretty marginalized communities that, need to have their voices heard through art.
Absolutely. So do you see any difference other than getting in and out of jail and prison from working with the kids out in the community centers?
I think in custody, there's a lot more frustration with the system. I think oftentimes they even have a better critical or more, keen perceptive of how exploitative, how unfair, and how biased it is. I think oftentimes kids that on the out, as people in custody will say, "Oh, you're on the out. What are you going to do tonight when you get home on the out?" But I think when people have their freedom, they're not necessarily worried about people that are locked up. And so I think the empathy building, and I think really just that critical understanding really comes when you're on one side of the justice system versus, never having any experience with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, my side was on the other side for a number of years. My background is, some people that have seen me here before, is in community mental health. And I also worked with the underserved, marginalized individuals for my 35 years, and spent about 6.5 years of that working out of Santa Rita in out of Pleasanton. So that was, that's been my experience, at least working through the mental health aspects of it. So it's a challenging community.
Definitely.
I don't want to leave Laura just looking like one of those little dogs that there used to be sitting on in the back of the cars. Now there seems to be a break. I mean, Sara, you seem to be into the remembrance and that, and then Laura with the business incubator part of the part of the organization. Can you let's talk about that for a sec.
I think that came largely out of our shift because of, everything being virtual. I think a large part of SGSA previously was in-person workshops. That was what drove SGSA all these years, and we can't do that right now. And so we wanted a way to serve youth as impactfully as we can and in a meaningful and intentional way. And since a lot of our workshops are sewing based and we don't necessarily have the equipment to provide every youth that engages with our program with a sewing machine or materials in their home right now. So we had to kind of really pivot and shift to rethink what our programming would look like. And so that, from that became the business incubator program. And so with that, it is serving youth that are, between the ages of 15 and 25, which is actually about our age, and giving them the entrepreneurial skills through access to industry experts. So, having them participate in workshops with individuals that either have an educational background in business or have themselves developed their own business. So kind of learning the skills from them, but also engaging with each other because there's a lot of power in hearing, each other's ideas and stories and what's working and getting insight from each other, but also having a one-on-one mentorship with someone in the industry as well. So I had kind of walked them through this program and process.
Okay. And now that's just been a pivot since the pandemic. Is that's been because that was one of my questions that obviously I've asked everybody is how is that's how that has affect your practice. And so Lauren, that's how you guys, as you said, have pivoted to still continue youth. How has that been going?
I mean, I think we're still in the very introductory stages of it. So we just have the application phase right now. And I think it's one of the aspects that, or one of the ways in which we have pivoted. There are other programs that we have also begun to implement or projects that we began to implement that have kind of been in response to our inability to hold these in-person workshops. So I know like Sara does, a lot of virtual workshops and has a lot of speaking engagements with different quote guilds. We also have the Remembrance Project and, where we're reaching out to families that have lost loved ones either as a result of officer involved shootings or just race-based or gender-based violence, and we're creating quilts for them. And so that was a way for us to not only respond to the pandemic itself but also the civil rights movement as critically as we could, to kind of give back in that way. And then also having a way for us to provide some of that art to community organizations or other activist organizations by having volunteers create blocks that will be translated into banners that they can hang to show their solidarity in terms of how they are responding to this movement as well. So those have been ways that we've kind of shifted as much as we can, and we've had a lot of rapid growth as a result of the movement and the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that it seems like you hit the ground with all of this just about when the exact right moment to have the maximum impact. I would imagine that it's opened some doors for you that probably wouldn't have been as easy to open before.
It definitely has. And I think, especially for the incubator and some of our other projects and programs as well, I think with it being virtual, we have a lot more capacity to reach people that we probably wouldn't have been able to reach before. And so like we've definitely seen that in some of our applicant pool for the incubator in terms of, it's across the country and we even have international applicants. And that would have been something that wasn't possible, in terms of us having in-person hands-on workshops. So it's really benefited us in terms of getting the exposure of SGSA.
Good. No, so how has the last 4 years really kind of, I'd like to hear from both of you how it has affected yourself or your project or what's been going on inside of you the last 4 years. Let's let Sara talk for a sec.
Yeah, no, we've done a bunch of workshops in terms of hundreds of kids over the last, 4 years. Definitely hundreds of kids. We've made dozens of quilts, from everywhere from Atlanta to Florida to Chicago. I think we've done from juvenile halls to, I mean, really everywhere. And I think that, obviously we haven't hit every state. I mean, there's lots of places we haven't done just due to we're a 100% volunteer run organization. But I think the amount of kids that we've given sewing exposure and access and workshops and really just, provided a space to unpack and talk about everything from their school's dress code to policies that are impacting them or, future fears or hopes. And I really think I should say it's just providing, like, I think it's really based in dialogue. It's rooted in that lived experience of the people that are engaging in the workshop, kind of coupled with using textile art as a means of just self-expression.
Sure. Now, when you walk into a plate for a community center or jail or wherever for the first time, what's your pitch to them?
We don't pitch; they come to us, so we respond. There's no
Okay.
asking if you want to.
So you don't have anything. I mean, you don't really. They bring in everything you talk about, you deal with, you work on. You just leave it open.
So they bring in the kids in the space, and we come in with the materials, the facilitator, the curriculum, and the raw stuff to make the block.
So you're just flying by the seat of your pants every time, and it works great.
Basically.
Do you have somebody, Sara, that just has always stuck in your mind, no matter for a kid that you thought was not really there and came around, or some lasting impression from doing some work with you?
We had a kid that was in one of our initial programs in summer 2016, and he's a current and was, engaged then in a lot of Oakland gang activities, young Latinx kid. And his perception of like, oh, sewing is for girls. I don't do this. I'm too cool for sewing. I'm into graffiti. Can I just have a piece of fabric and just put graffiti on it? And I said, hey, if you want to do graffiti, you're welcome to. Just cut out your graffiti letters instead of painting them. You can sew them. Just do graffiti with fabric. And by the end of the program, he really had developed love and has made more than one quilt at this point. So I think just kind of his misconceptions about who sews and what a textile artist can look like. We definitely unpack those biases and, why did you come into this thinking this was a grandma hobby? And who told you that only women sew? Let's unpack everything from your culture to, your exposure. So I think he's been an amazing example, and he's gotten to speak at a few things since then. And he graduated high school, at 20, but he still really enjoyed the workshop and the process and comes to things that we offer in the Bay Area as well.
Okay. So you saw, I mean, he took a crossroads and took a different turn after having spending some time with you, it sounds like.
Definitely.
Well, that's really cool. Well, Lauren, where else? We have a whole bunch of time left, so we need to fill it. What else would you like to talk about?
I mean, I feel like that's the gist of where we are right now. I think right now we're just trying to expand as much as we can. And, again, with the rapid growth and kind of realizing that we are a volunteer-based organization and trying to respond to that as fast as we can, knowing like our limitations as people and also our limitations with our volunteers, but recognizing, kind of trying to capture this moment as best as possible. Trying to see like what our organization is going to look like in the future. I feel like that's a large part of our conversation is, what the moving forward is going to look like for us. So we're really trying to start to capture our own vision and purpose and, look towards the future as much as possible.
So for either of you, is this your full-time endeavor, or do you got like most artists at least a day job or something?
We both. She's a full-time student and I'm a full-time teacher.
Okay. Oh, that's right. You're teaching what? I should know.
5 Keys. We're at Santa Rita. 5 Keys.
Okay. You're out at Santa Rita. Yeah. I was with Prison Health Services, but this is 20 years ago. I don't even know. I know Alameda County does mental health out there, but I haven't been out there in probably 20 years. So, but it was I enjoyed it out there. I thought it was I was seeing probably absolutely a different kind of people that you were seeing, but it wasn't, obviously it's not where somebody wants to be, but from the different couple of other jails that I've been into, it was, it wasn't bad. But then I dealt with a lot of Reds and a lot of people in the mental health units and on meds and stuff like that. But so when was the last time you were out at Rita?
I'm staying in Solano County. So I've been in Oakland, I've been in CJ5 and a bunch of the Bay Area county jails. But for the most part, I'm in Solano County, in Fairfield, which is Clay Bank Detention Facility, and in community satellite campuses.
Okay. Okay. So you walk the walk and talk the talk, huh?
Slightly.
Yeah, no, I mean I could go on with mental health out there, but yeah, but that's cool. I know that Rita was, at least when I was there, was really committed to, again, education and getting people some skills while they were out in jail. I mean, I know there was a mothers group that dealt with all the pregnant women and followed them even after they had gotten out, and the education and things like that. I think that was a really nice opportunity for those people.
Oh, definitely.
What? So, any current plans for another DVD or book on your about your sewing patterns and stuff, or sewing with Sara?
Yeah, no more sewing with Sara, but we are making a book about SGSA and the Remembrance Project. It's going to be like a trilogy series. It's going to feature the families who are getting quotes, who want to share their story about, what they care about and what they want to, share about the lives, not focusing on the moment their loved one was taken, but really focus on painting a full picture of who they were. Because as we know, the media can often misinterpret and, entangle things in the wrong way, if you understand the popular culture reference. But, then it's going to focus on the volunteers. We've had an amazing community. Often quilting is, it can be often synonymous with a racist society. Quilting isn't as liberal as the Bay Area is, and as a whole, oftentimes has a conservative, keep politics out of quilting vibe. But I think SGSA has really been intentional with drawing amazing volunteers that are committed to empathy and building and accepting whiteness and unpacking and dismantling whiteness, and using their platform to highlight and, advocate and amplify voices of Black, Indigenous, people of color, young people. I mean, it's just been really intentional to see what great people, it's like SGSA is a magnet, and the people that it's bringing to the table are really great. And so these volunteers that have stepped up for the Remembrance Project to create, blocks and memorialized names. The second part of the book is going to really talk about, who they are and what they're doing and what they're learning, and talk about their, learning or unlearning, their personal transformation. And then part 3 is going to be about SGSA, feature profiles of kids, things they've made, things they care about, talk to our facilitators, and really talk to the young people, for the most part, that are doing the bulk of the work.
Cool. When do you see that seeing the light of day? Being on Amazon or on your website?
Yeah, September 21 is hopefully when it will be, available.
Cool. Very cool. Very nice. Now, Sara, you said that when you were Cal, you were social justice. What took you in that direction? Because that social justice is a little different than sewing with Sara.
Yeah, I think, in 2012, when Trayvon was murdered, I was in a sewing class with, a bunch of amazing mentors that I had for, a few months, if not years. And I think that their lack of, passion for his murder, and not, passion, obviously their lack of rage is what really caused me to divert from the traditional quilting community and really start blazing, my own trail, in the sense of, I want to make quilts with a message. I want to make quilts that are saying something. I want to make quilts with a purpose. I don't want to sew, for fun anymore. There's too many, I'm a Black female. I can't let, all these, I can't let these things pass me by and focus on flying geese. I've got to do a little more, I got to combine my love for, being Black in a sewing space is a level of resistance, because oftentimes, you're not the mainstream culture and you are ostracized, and you do have to take those things into account. So I think at one moment I stopped sewing in spaces of whiteness to just sew for fun and sew for the skill of sewing. And I really began to unlearn and start unpacking, what am I making? Why am I making? For who am I making? And with what community am I making? Am I using my platform to the best of my ability, or am I sewing for the love of sewing? So I think once I really started reflecting internally and started asking myself those intrinsic questions, that's when, my passion and my voice started saying, forget making patterns. I don't care about the capitalistic aspect of sewing. Let's make it free. Let's make it accessible. And I really started just, let's have a nonprofit with this community, almost reparations model, where the community donates free fabric. We do free workshops with kids. Kids make art that's embroidered, again, by the community that's oftentimes donating the fabric. Let's piece the quilts. Let's have the youth voice heard. It's really just a, very community-based circle, and community, just intergenerational model that's really amplifying, youth voice. They might not have the talent and the skills, but they have a message and they have some art that they, like to share on a greater scale.
Okay. Well, Sara, you can, Lauren, you can hop in and give us a little perspective from your side.
Well, for me, I'm coming from more the education side. I'm a school psychologist. So
Okay.
I come from it from I guess a slightly different perspective, but also, in terms of supporting youth, but in I guess a very different way. So I am more focused on, I guess my social justice has been supporting, low income youth and supporting youth that are marginalized or have multiply marginalized identities. And so that was my motivation for aligning myself, with that SJSA as much as I have. Because of the communities that I work with and in, and also because of the communities that I was raised in, and seeing the lack of resources and supports that those communities received. And a program like this would have been really beneficial to have something that is so unique and that gives youth a space to voice their own political statements and have that platform, and things like that didn't exist where I was raised. So aligning myself with this to, as much as I can, bring that to my own communities, but also from the education side to kind of enrich, some of our own programming to make sure that those that we are engaging with can benefit from that as well.
Yeah, no. Now, so Sara, where is the Trayvon Martin quilt? Is it hanging somewhere, or is it at home with you?
It's currently, I believe, at UC Riverside. So we have exhibits, scheduled throughout the year. A lot of them have been paused or postponed due to COVID, but UC Riverside went forward. We have an upcoming one at Everhart. Just really showing the quilts. So showing the art, showing a lot of the youth quilts, individual quilts, community quilts, just lots of things. But currently it's at Riverside. Now,
this seems I guess the first thing that pops into my mind when you're talking about showing and community and big is the in the 80s, the AIDS quilts.
That was definitely the inspiration for the Remembrance Project. The kids saw the AIDS quilt was hanging in Oakland, San Francisco a few months ago, and they were like, why don't we have a version of this for all the people that are getting killed senselessly? Breonna Taylor's killers still haven't been arrested. Ahmaud, it took 3 months and it going viral to get any justice. I think oftentimes, people, their proximity to privilege or access or law enforcing families and lots of things just mitigate, justice being served. And I think, for some communities, social media isn't just social media. Social media is a tool to get justice, similar to the civil rights, movements where they were killing and letting people get attacked with dogs and water hoses. And the newspaper showing that stirred enough national empathy to want to do better. So I think social media, for the Black community, I speak from my perspective as a millennial, we're not using social media to just, viralize and just glorify trauma. We're really using social media as a means of, look what happened, let's fight for justice. It's a unifying tool of you don't believe that it's unfair, watch the video and then make a judgment call now.
Right.
Visuals. And the Remembrance Project, just, it's not just law enforcement officers killing people. It's people, it's Black on Black crimes. It's gang violence. The levels are so, it's unsolved murders. It's police murders. There's so many people, but really I think the unifying theme is there's so much of a lack of justice in so many of these cases. The families are still fighting, and we know who the killer is, but his job, his occupation, although be it armed, it's not an excuse to kill. And it's yes, defunding the police is something that, a lot of us should say you feel strongly in, and, whatever, there's platforms for everyone to have their, voices, shared, but really just understanding it's more than just, A or B. It's really the gray area of making sure we listen to people. I think people's lived experiences and their opinions and their their narratives. It's like, just because, they haven't gone to Berkeley or Harvard or, Middlebury or so, like, they still should have their voices. You don't have to have credentials behind your name to, be able to say something and be heard. I think it's really about, like, there's a quote by Roddy Roy that says, "There's no such thing as the voiceless, only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard." And so there's a lot of kids that are not just preferably unheard, but they're literally deliberately silent. So I should say it's really about giving kids fabric, scissors, glue to create something to make sure that, that voice, that block, that art is going to be heard. It's going to be seen, because as an organization, we can back it, making sure that we can get it into spaces where, whether people agree or not, that's not what we can promise, but we can promise that your voice can be heard, seen, et cetera, et cetera.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think every voice needs to be heard, and every voice needs to be listened to. So I mean, it's always been a two-way street, and I think that's something that's really has been missing very badly for the last couple years.
Definitely.
So now, Lauren, you were saying that you're in the application process. Is that somebody coming in and giving you a specific just an idea that they want to work with, or has it not gotten that far into the ideas and that yet?
It actually has. So we have an actual online application where youth can give us a little bit about their business idea, and some of them already have businesses established. And so what we're going to be doing is kind of like refining and honing those. But some of them, it really just is an idea. And so, in that application is explaining what that idea is, giving us a little bit of background so we can kind of gauge like how we can support them. And that also will help us in the mentor pairing process, because we really want to make sure that when we're pairing mentors, that they can best support, from their own expertise, these youth as much as possible. So the application process right now is really just kind of trying to get as much information as we can before we start to engage them in the workshops.
Okay. So then I would assume then for at least probably till the beginning of next year with their mentors, it'll all be virtual.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the program is 6 months long. So it's going to run from September to February. But
Okay.
I mean, a lot of them won't even be in the same state or city as their mentors. We're going to try really hard to pair them, so if things do open up, there is potential for an in-person meeting. But a lot of that might not be possible. So it will be virtually for the most part.
Sure. I would think that being virtual, it gives you almost an unendless list of possibilities of people that can mentor, that have that specific skill for that one specific kid.
Exactly. And so that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you sew?
I personally do not. My art form was dance. So we were on the separate sides of that spectrum in terms
Okay.
of.
I would just. So what brought you two together then?
I think just like similar passions in terms of working with youth. And, like she's more like the big ideas, like the visionary, and I'm more like, the behind the scenes, like make it happen. And so like, I guess just knowing like our own strengths, and we had like a friendship prior to this. So kind of building upon that. And so that kind of manifested into like a working relationship.
Sure, I can see with Sara, she has that just kind of like that energy that just needs to get out. That whenever she's not talking or not doing something, it's just wanting to get out. I just get that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And so a lot of my job is like taking that energy and those ideas and kind of putting it to reality and making it, something that's feasible and tangible as much as possible. But, also making sure that it's true to her vision. So
Sure. No, I mean, it sounds like a very good symbiotic relationship that you played a both strengths. Lauren, I had a feeling that you were more of the behind the scene paper and pencil. No, I don't know if we can do that way. How about this, or how about this timeline instead of that? And no, yeah,
That's my accountability part. That's yin and yang. We're friends since high school, so we're pretty solid.
So high school, wow. Okay, did you guys go to did you go to Cal or also, or did you where you took off?
We both
yeah,
got
I had the
accepted
option to do that, and that's how we met.
Okay.
Go ahead. You can tell the story.
We both got Berkeley, and we were like, oh, like, let's go to Cal. And she was like, no, I want to go to Middlebury. So she flew off to Vermont, and I stayed in the Bay for 4 years. But, I think, social justice wise, they're both really intrinsically like ingrained in our colleges. So we just kept in touch. And when she moved back home to start, her doctoral program at UCLA and stuff, I'm just like, hey, you're back in Cali. She's like, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm cool with colleges. And I was like, let's bring it. Because I think there is a big aspect of like the therapeutic process that, can happen through working with marginalized kids who want to, having a trauma-informed lens. And I'm like, hey, we can help train facilitators together. And I definitely like idea bounce all day. So it's been cool to do this with, your peers and people really from your community.
Sure. So you guys are just virtual most of the time, or have you seen each other since February or March?
No.
No, okay. And how has that been? How before the pandemic, how often did you do face-to-faces?
Every few years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if it was years or months or whatever. Okay. So it wasn't a regular kind of thing before. It was mostly virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. No, yeah, that makes it, you can go, yeah, either of you can be anywhere and you're still connected. I think that's something that I found has been one of the most positive things about this is being able to keep connections. I mean, hell, I remember, long distance calls and snail mail. And, my daughter just turned 22. So I know, I mean, and then, and I told her, oh, I'm on Twitch. And she goes, what? And thought that, and I throw all this terminology at her. One of my sons didn't text me back in time. And I said, you ghosting me? And he laughed. He gave me a real hard time. It's, how do you know about that? So, but yeah, I mean, it's ever changing and ever morphing. What's the future look like for you guys? I mean, what's post-pandemic? You just go back to pre-pandemic, or how do you think that's going to have a lasting impact on your foundation and your own practice?
Do you want to take that one, Sarah?
Yeah.
Or I can take it.
Sure.
I think
Go for it.
in large part is making sure that there's always a virtual element of our programming, so that we don't have to do this significant shift and pivot ever again. So that it's kind of built into what we do, and then that also, like we mentioned previously, broadens our audience significantly. But again, it's working towards continuing to grow the organization, and we have the momentum right now. We have a lot of support coming in because of kind of like the movement going on, and so kind of building on that as much as we can to increase our volunteer base to kind of work on this programming, but also continuing to hone our own projects and programs as much as we can.
Okay. Sarah, now you.
Yeah, I would echo that, and really just training facilitators. I think that there's a lot of I think like right now, like maybe prior to COVID, I would have been a little, perhaps a bit more weary about, but I think right now, I think particularly white quilters, they're waking up like critically. They're becoming far more aware. They're engaging in their own learning and unlearning. They're waking up to constructs of whiteness and really wanting now a desire to be an anti-racist. So personally, I feel a lot more comfortable with let's train facilitators up, and let's not, make it a small team trying to, expand the U.S., but really I think the allies, when you see people doing the work, it's a lot more, comfortable to be like, hey, I believe you can do this too, without ever furthering harming or marginalizing the communities that we want to help. So it's definitely been, so enlightening to just see how many quilters and textile artists and people in the sewing community that are really, speaking up, standing up, understanding that silence is violence, understanding that just going with the status quo, can be really further harming and ostracized. And it's really just been amazing to see how many allies are really, shining through in the sewing community specifically.
Now, Lauren, you said you had a foreign participant in the incubator, and could I ask from at least just what country?
London, actually.
Really, from England? Oh, okay. And how did they find you?
I'm assuming from social media. I am like that's a lot of where marketing is coming from right now. It's just like, influencers on social media and kind of pushing it that way. So I'm assuming from word of mouth, and someone just said this sounds like something that would work well for you or a program that you'd be interested in. I was honestly shocked to see that application come through. But then again, that speaks to the potential and the exposure from a virtual element. That's something that we could again have never done before. And even to Sarah's point about facilitators, having a smaller team is a lot harder for 3 or 4 people to be in 10,000 places at one time. And so if we have more facilitators, we can have a lot more ongoing workshops. We can have long-term programs. We can have those things in cities that we haven't even reached yet. And so beginning to get to that part of our organization, it just further expands and grows SJSA beyond what we could have imagined 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Well, you could have a Twitch channel that everybody comes in at a particular not time every week, and they sew and talk, and anybody's invited or whatever. That would be, again, that would, I guess, again, exposing you to a whole different audience. I mean, that's the whole
Right.
point, I guess, with this is when I, the first after Trump was elected, no, I didn't do anything new it was probably 6 months. I had some commissions, I had some older work to do, but I mean, it was hard to even get out of bed for a while. And then, it was just I've got to do something more than just what I need to do for my own mental health. I mean, there's got to be, and I found all these different organizations and different people doing all kinds of really cool, different political, social justice kinds of art in all different mediums. I think it's great. I love the sewing, and I actually am getting ready to start on another embroidery piece for myself, but it's going to be probably 4 or 5 times larger than the piece that I did for the Tiny Pricks project. But it exposed me to something that I'd never thought. I mean, with quilts, I've always seen a lot of textile artists. So I've seen some really beautiful, unusual quilts over the years, or how textile is used non-traditionally. But yeah, sewing was just it was just kind of a new experience, and it was more soothing in evening than reading the AP feed, or playing a dumb video game, than sitting out there with a needle and thread and doing something that had hopefully some lastness to it.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, I guess that's your whole story is.
Literally.
I know. Wow.
There's a question. Hi.
Hey.
There's a question from the Twitch channel, which is basically, what is the most unique or most interesting project you've ever facilitated a student to make? Like maybe the most unusual project. Like you mentioned the kid who did graffiti on a quilt and then got really into quilting. What other stuff have you seen that's just been like really surprising that they came up with that?
We had one student named Bianca who did an entire quilt on the alphabet. And I think that her perception of translating ideas from A through Z and associating them with not only the social justice topic, but the visual that she chose was pretty phenomenal. We also had a group of high school kids in Utah that they had like a 6-week, full, like just real in-depth relearning, and I wouldn't say unlearning, but really relearning of like American history, particularly Black history, from Africa to slavery to the slave trade to rape and genocide, and I mean so many things. I think art that they created, and I think that really art created in conjunction with learning is some of the most powerful art there can really be. And it's like art with a message is phenomenal. Art with an opinion, or with something they've learned. I mean, everything from luxury tax in states that tax tampons to people not being able to vote after they've been out of jail if they have unpaid tickets in Florida. So so many, once kids realize some injustice in their state, area, local, national, whatever, and they get angry. And I think just in general, the younger generation really we've kind of got a heart of gold. I mean, I'm a millennial, and I see, Gen Z and, people before and below me. And it's like, we really want to push the needle to being more loving, more inclusive, but not just using the words, but truly like walking the talk, from everything from, care to everything. Like it's just really, it's great to see how many kids care and, what they create. So I think, those have been two particularly amazing projects. Also, we've had a workshop in a juvenile hall in Texas called the Giddings Juvenile State School. One of the kids had life, and just hearing a kid create art to, have life sentence was, their artist statement. Like even that we've done a workshop in CJ5, and so it's like that's a California County Jail for those who don't know. But listen to inmates' perception of justice and mob and injustice everywhere causes violence, and like their art. It's more than. It's been really just like from all standards and all walks of life. It's been so, I learn all the time. It's like I come in as a facilitator. Yes, I provide an overview and a structure of like, this is what the curriculum is going to be about. But really, it's like I never leave a workshop. I leave a workshop knowing more than I did when I walked in. And I think like that accumulates, over time. It's just geographically, it's been, eye-opening. And really you can see where certain inequities are hitting a community disproportionately hard. Like in Baltimore, up with 200 kids and have 50 out of the 200, make blocks about this one issue. Wow, that's impacting this many of you. Like those numbers alone. What can we do? How can we help?
No, exactly. I think that from the community mental health that I used to do, that I always learned from my clients, no matter who they were, if they're adult sex offenders or the chronically mentally ill. I always came away with, if nothing else, thinking about something that I hadn't thought about before, and then that usually turned into art, because that was for a long time I did black and white photography, and that was all ruins of buildings and textures and things like that. And then once I got into three-dimensional work, that it's always had a voice to it. It has a very strong opinion to a lot of it. And so I think I think I've never liked pretty pictures. I've loved beautiful work that it's beautiful because it addresses something, or it makes you think differently about something.
I would agree. I think that, using art as a power, art can be used as a tool to change the world, just like education can. So really using all mediums and all forms, to move the needle, or even just be the catalyst for a conversation that could spark a mind to create change. Like we can use so many things. So I appreciate all forms of art.
Yeah. Now, when you do a workshop in a community, then after the process, I guess you have an opening or a show that shows all the people's work, and then the whole community at large is invited in.
That is exactly the model.
So how surprised are people?
It depends. Are we at a homogeneously white quilt show, or are we at the community arts center? I think that depending on the venue that wants to show the quote, I think more than anything, the communities that are shocked are quilters. The communities that are shocked is the sewing world. Communities that the kids are coming from, they're aware of, the issues, and it really just depends on how close it is based on the geographical location of who made the art. Because if we're in Michigan and half the kids are making, blocks about Flint, the water issue, and they're doing it, like when Flint sees that, that work done, they're like, yeah, we know, we're drinking it too. But when that quilt travels to Tallahassee, Florida, or a quilt show, Minnesota, they're like, what? Like bloody water and brown water and, just all sorts of stuff. It's like, I think oftentimes the learning happens with the intergenerational community that not only borders the work, but then like the different geographical location of who gets to see the work. Because if the kids are telling me, listening to them about what they care about, it's different when you have a fresh set of ears.
Sure. No, you're not just, you're giving each of them an individual voice, and I think that's interesting because our 24-hour news cycle, if it the old Hearst, if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. So I know there's still you occasionally still hear things about Flint and how little has changed really. But you know, the news is, you know, has done its thing, and so it's on to something else. But yeah, I think it's keeping the story alive, as you said, to sharing it with people that, again, in another part of the country that it's not on the news, so they don't hear about it.
Exactly.
So, ladies, what do you want to now? You want to pitch something? I mean, you need to give out contact information for, because what will happen with this is after tonight, it stays on Twitch for a couple days, and then Julian moves it over to our YouTube channel where everything is stored or archived. And so what do you want? Is there anything else other than what we've already talked about, or said in a different way that you'd like to end this kind of thing on?
I think just a different way
I would say
involved too.
Oh, let's Lauren talk first.
I was going to say just the different ways people can get involved. I mean, there's definitely a whole lot of information on our website in terms of our different projects, and depending on people's skill set, things that may speak to them the most. But, you know, in terms of like our Remembrance Project or even the Banners Project, they're, you know, going on our website, there's ways for you to volunteer for that. If you're interested in the business incubator, that's a little bit more immediate. And there's ways that, you know, those that do have experience with, again, educational experience with business or develop their own business, there's a form for them to complete to volunteer to be a mentor. And so just knowing that in being a mentor, you're volunteering for at least 5 hours a month of your time. We do have like an hour block that is set up, that like a formal hour as part of the program. But again, we anticipate that your mentee is going to reach out to you beyond that, because they might have questions that, you know, within the scope of that hour can't be discussed. So just, you know, a maximum of 5 hours a month for the duration of the 6 months. So for those that are interested in volunteering in that capacity, that's one way to do it. But then we also, you know, have people that reach out to us just saying that they want to help in whatever way. So we're also open to that. If you have any kind of skill set that you feel like, you know, would be relevant to either helping us immediately or with the growth of the organization, you know, you can either reach out to me directly, or there's like forms that, you know, you can fill out on the website, just so we can kind of get a sense of your experience, your skill set, and then I will reach out to you for more information from you.
Well, Julian,
definitely.
reach out to Julian, and as I said, get you guys your own Twitch channel. I think that
Definitely.
I mean, that just seems like it would fit right into what you're doing and where you're going right now. To have as you said, a set time every week that anybody can tune in, and you two or one of you are there, and you let whoever shows up go. I mean, that seems like, and I know Julian would more than happy to help you guys out, wouldn't you, Julian?
Sure, totally.
We live to serve.
Always good to help out the community.
Yeah.
No,
So I kind of jumped in after Lauren. So now it's your chance to say something, Sarah.
I would just say, and feel free to donate. Like, you can donate monetarily, you can donate a sewing machine, you can donate fabric, scissors. I mean, just think of an entire, like, you know, sewing process. If there's anything that, you know, people have that you might not be using, perhaps your grandkids aren't interested in it, you know, you can definitely give it a good home to, you know, a bunch of kids through us, just via mail. Our address is in our Instagram bio and on the website, or you can shoot us a message, hey, I have this, would you guys like it? 99.9%, you know, the answer will be yes, you know, particularly cotton fabric, batik, skin tones, textures like that. But really, you know, just instead of, you know, just donating to your local Goodwill, you can send it to a place where, you know, we can guarantee it'll be used well.
Sure. Now, I'll go off. I mean, we've got a little bit of time. Lauren, so you're at UCLA working on a PhD?
No, I'm at LMU and I'm working on my EDS.
Okay.
I just got my master's and I'm working on my EDS.
Okay. Okay, good. Julian, I think maybe we're just going to wrap this up maybe a little early, unless there's some other questions that I have not seen.
I think this is Katie. The questions you guys actually nailed most of the questions, and you anticipated a lot of the questions. I guess the final question I had as the producer was, I'm really interested. You guys are very young to like have started a foundation that has such a broad reach, and I know that the nonprofit world tends to be kind of like an older, like there's the kind of the nonprofit industrial complex of like this older kind of, there's a certain kind of donor and there's a certain way of handling them and there's a certain thing. And it sounds like you guys are working really to change that model and make it a lot more inclusive. What advice would you give to people who are thinking about making their artistic practice into a bigger project where they take themselves and become, instead of being an artist as a solo person expressing stuff, but artist as facilitator and artist as a agent of community change? I would love to hear some thoughts about that for me.
No, that's a great question, Katie. Thank you.
Business incubator, you want to take this one?
Well, I was gonna say you can go first. I was gonna go after that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we both need to say something.
Let's do both.
You guys
I would
agree.
say really just, online, if you want to figure out how to do a nonprofit, I watched YouTube videos, applied for the EIN, applied for the paperwork. There's also industries such as LegalZoom if you want to just immediately do it instead of the DIY model. But I think right now with social media, there's really nothing you can't do. With the internet, I mean, with an iPhone, literally, like, I can't wait, for 6 months in February. Would love to talk again, but really to show us what can 30 plus kids do with a little bit of mentoring, a little bit of guidance, but also with that seed money, which can often, be the red or yellow line of, making it happen or, cautiously moving forward. But more importantly, I'd say with social media, I definitely say would ask for help, post on a Facebook group. You don't know who you don't know, and you don't know what your people have done unless you ask. That's just say, we have lots of volunteers at Border for Blocks and say, hey, we need help making a newsletter. Does anyone have skills in that area? And people will volunteer. And really, if you have a mission that a lot of people can get behind, it's not that hard to find people that will support it.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. Like the network aspect is a huge, as part of SJSA's success and growth. And I think, with social media, you have the increased ability to kind of reach out to people and be like, hey, this is, if people have similar interests that have similar, business models, be like, hey, like I'm also doing this. Could you guide me through this? Or do you have time to talk about, what this may look like? And so that's really beneficial. And, starting to build that network is a huge part of it. And so that is a skill and an aspect of, growing this business that I feel like is really central, especially because like Sara said, we are so volunteer based, and a lot of it just comes to people saying like, hey, like this is something that I know really well. What can I do to help? But it's like putting yourself out there first. And, we spend a lot of time saying like, hey, you're running a program very similar to ours. Can you walk us through what that looks like, how you got there? Kind of how can we model ourselves after you? And so that has helped us in a lot of ways.
Oh, great thought. Great. Anything else? Anybody else? Katie, Julian, anything you like? That was a great question.
No, we really appreciate both of you coming and sharing your thoughts and kind of teaching us how to think about, I don't know, just like helping, like we really appreciate that you letting us help you kind of spread your vision of what you're trying to do and what you are doing very much, because we want artists, as Clint wanted, like artists of the resistance. We want to have artists in all forms of media, in all making fabric art, and we want to have all kind of, and so we're really glad that you guys are doing the work. And yeah.
Do you guys want to come back in February?
Do you want to come back in February and show off what your first incubes have made?
Or you can do like a mid sort of like meet and greet sort of idea in which you can do like halfway through the year if they have like a showing then and then one at the finale so people can tune in.
I think that would be really cool.
Well, yeah, and I'd love to see you next, as you said, you said September 21 is the trilogy is coming out, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I mean we had a curator activist just on last week that had just put a book together that it was not, it's not normal art in the time of Trump, and that was something she's been working on for the last year or so. and it was really great having her on to so she could pitch the book. And she had done a lot of other activist kind of art through the Bay Area, but now she's in New York. And yeah, I mean, there's us. Yeah, it's network. I guess part of it came from my mental health side. Is I always knew I didn't know everything, and I needed to be able to access the people who needed to know, because I needed to find sometimes unique or unusual services or different things like that for clients, and always knew who at least who I could go to find out that information. And I think that's bled into the art, that I'm always looking for, you know, looking at new art and talking to new people. I mean, this is kind of Katie started like this, and I was real hesitant at the beginning. Goes, oh, I don't want to get on every week. And, but, this, I mean, I definitely have learned a ton of stuff so far. And I continue to, as we said earlier, continue to think that I'll keep learning more stuff the longer I do this. So I want to thank you both for educating us tonight.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be on. Definitely, look forward to sharing this with, and really just, the business incubator, and really just understanding that youth voices matter too, and everyone, deserves amplification.
Okay. I guess that wraps us up a couple minutes early tonight. Again, as I said, the video will be up within a week of this interview to go with all the other ones in our YouTube. I know that Katie will put all the relevant information up with it, so we can drive people in the right direction to you guys. And I guess we all say good night, right, Julian?
Yeah, I think that's about it. So, all right, kids, why don't you hold on while I stop the stream, okay?
Okay.
Everybody just hang out for a second, please.